Adult animation isn't a new topic to the channel, nor is the unfortunate topic of the medium being overlooked in the entertainment industry. From our talk of the poor treatment that Olin Rogers and Final Space received from executives, to the recent news of Netflix canceling Inside Job, I think it's now more important than ever to share appreciation and support for quality series when they come by, both old and new. And this of course gives us a plethora of hidden gems out there, series that may have been overlooked in their time or canceled abruptly, but are still worth a watch and really deserve some appreciation. With that in mind, I'd like to shed some light on what I feel is one of the most overlooked series in Adult Swim's lineup, Moral Orel.
I'm sorry I goofed up. I was just trying to be good, so you could love me more than you do now.
Oh, Orel, I could never love you more. People only have a certain amount of love in them, and I'm afraid I have to divide mine up between at least a dozen people.
Oh.
Hello, Doomers and Doomettes, I'm your host Didi, and I hope you went to church today, because this time around we're going to be talking about a little show called Moral Orel, a series that can only be described as an unholy combination of Davey and Goliath mixed with South Park. Moral Orel was a stop-motion series that aired on Adult Swim for 3 seasons before its cancellation. If you haven't seen it already, at first glance it may appear to be your typical adult animated series, taking a childish-looking show and adding adult jokes into it, but if you were to actually watch it, you would find something far more dark, and while still maintaining a comedic tone for most of the time, it actually slips into some heavily dramatic moments, with characters shifting from mocking caricatures of social archetypes to far more grounded and emotional beings. It's an incredible roller coaster ride of a series, and one of which I don't think has been truly replicated, not only on Adult Swim, but beyond it as well. So as always, just before we begin, I'd just like to humbly ask for you to consider liking the video, or even subscribing if you want to see more content like this. And if you're a returning subscriber, thanks for coming back to the channel. With that said, get on your Sunday best, be rid of those immoral thoughts, because it's time to talk about Moral Orel.
What's up, real son of mine?
How do you keep from loving someone too much?
Glad you asked, Orel. Love is a very beautiful, very intense feeling for a startlingly short period of time. Before long, you realize it just gets in the way of the real important things in life, like just going to sleep or being left alone. That's when love starts fading and lies kick in.
But how long does it actually take for love to fade?
Oh, quicker than you think, kid. Quicker than you think.
Moral Orel was created by Dino Stamatopoulus, who is no stranger to comedy series, as he's worked on projects like Mr. Show with Bob Odenkirk and David Cross, Mad TV, The Late Show with David Letterman, and may be most recognized for his role as Starburns on the series Community. Dino wrote the script for Moral Orel, which was originally just called Iggy, 10 years prior to its air date, where it sat with him until he was urged to pitch it.
I was actually on a comedy website on a message board talking to all my fans, which is like, I don't know, 6, 7 people. One of them suggested, why not make a cartoon out of it? The whole climate of America at the time was, very religious, and, I'm just trying to be funny. I'm not trying to change the world here, unless, I'm talking to you now and the world has changed because of Moral Orel.
Dino was then joined by Scott Adsit and Jay Johnston, his right and left-hand men, as he describes, to assist with the show's production. Greenlit and picked up by Adult Swim, Moral Orel entered production as a stop-motion series with some recognizable companies behind it. It was produced by William Street, the in-house production studio for Adult Swim series such as Aqua Teen Hunger Force, Space Ghost Coast to Coast, Robot Chicken, and so on. Shadow Machine, a production company which may sound familiar to returning viewers, as it was one of the companies involved with Final Space, and Fragical Productions, Dino's own production company. Now, Moral Orel can initially be described as a satirical take on religious fundamentalism, focusing on a small town called Moralton, in the fictional state of State Soda, as we see the daily adventures and shenanigans of the titular main character, Orel Puppington, as he gets involved in various hijinks across the town. Episodes generally follow a traditional formula. Orel will misunderstand a lesson from church or his parents, and he would take that misunderstanding to an extreme before being corrected by his father and given some sort of a lesson of the day. It's a familiar children's show formula, recognized in series like Davey and Goliath or Leave It to Beaver and so on. The difference is where Davey may forget to do some chores around the house in one episode and learn a lesson in responsibility, Orel may accidentally create a prostitution ring in the town or raise the dead. And every time it ends with the harshest punishment of them all, a stern talking to from his father.
I'll take him from here, Don.
Well...
To my study.
Of the main characters in the series, there's the Puppington family, consisting of Orel himself, his father Clay, his mother Blaberta, and his younger brother Shapey. It parodies and deconstructs the traditional nuclear family tropes by adding some more realistic and jaded sides to their characters. Whereas traditional sitcoms would place the father figure in a father knows best type of role, Clay Puppington is instead a bitter, cynical alcoholic instead of being the voice of reason like in a show from the 1950s. Clay would often insert his hateful outlook into daily lessons as his son looks to him, ultimately giving some sort of twisted viewpoint as he pushes a moral code on his family, not out of a desire to do good, but to maintain the social codes of Moralton. He's really not the kind of dad you want to take any advice from.
Working is a very hard, soul-numbing, and joyless experience, son.
Gosh, thanks for preparing me for the future, Dad. You're the best.
If I can make sure you're ready for the dead-end bleakness of adulthood, then I've done my job.
Orel's mother, Blaberta, parodies the tropes of the traditional housewife by having her be obsessive-compulsive in her duties while maintaining emotional distance from her family, with a heavy disdain for her husband.
Mom, guess what? Dad isn't Shapey's father.
I know that, Orel.
Her cheerful, sing-song-esque outward persona is ultimately little more than a mask held up to please others around her while neglecting to do anything for herself. And then there's Orel's brother, Shapey, a child who clearly needs help and close, caring parenting but is ultimately ignored due to the narcissistic attitude of Clay and Blaberta, resulting in an incredibly bratty and obnoxious child. What makes this relationship unique, at least in my opinion, is the fact that Orel maintains a sense of innocence and naivety despite his family. He still looks up to his mother and father, and is honestly a good-hearted child despite ending up in some interesting predicaments. And it's something that goes on to grow throughout the series, but that's something I'd like to touch on a little later in the video. For now, let me just continue to give a brief overview of the other supporting characters in the series. Other prominent characters in the show include Reverend Putty, pastor of the town church who uses his platform for venting his frustrations and depressed thoughts about loneliness, Coach Stopframe, Orel's gym coach who Clay is romantically involved with, Miss Censordoll, the town librarian who is more interested in burning books than reading them, and Doey Latchkey, Orel's dim-witted best friend. The show ran from 2005 to 2008 for 3 seasons with 43 episodes. However, the series faced some conflict from Adult Swim right from the premiere. You see, the series was set to premiere in December of 2005, and a Christmas episode was produced for the show, as the season finale of the first season. However, against the wishes of the series staff, because the episode was related to Christmas, Adult Swim ultimately premiered the season finale first as a way to fit in with the other Christmas specials airing at the time. The problem with this was Moral Orel was not a show that would just reset to status quo at the end of each episode. It wasn't like Aqua Teen Hunger Force where characters could just die and come back, and ultimately, despite how nonsensical things could get, Moral Orel was very good with sticking to its own canon, while having consistent character development episode to episode, with the season finale intending to draw together some plot threads introduced in the season. So, unfortunately, it wasn't a particularly good episode to set up as the premiere, and certainly left a good number of viewers confused about the show. Additional complications came up when the Standards and Practices Department of Cartoon Network initially held back 3 of the 10 episodes making up Season 1, considering if they were too inappropriate for television airing. But despite these hardships, fortunately it garnered enough attention to warrant a second season. While Season 1 is very good in its humor, I'd say it's Season 2 where the show really shines. The writing becomes more clever, the stories of those in the town become expanded upon, and the plot threads from prior episodes continue to grow. The number of episodes in the season jumps up to 20, all while building up to honestly one of the best episodes in the series, the finale of Season 2, Nature. Now, I don't want to get into too much detail on this episode to not spoil elements of the series for those of you curious to check it out, but what I will say is this episode pinpoints a crucial turning point for the series, where the show turns much darker into a serious drama beyond the world of the satirical, which sets the tone for Season 3. I want to put a bit of emphasis on this. The drama that begins in Nature going into Season 3 is not merely something that's just dark and edgy trying to elicit some shocked response. The show feels real. It feels brutal and depressing, and not the kind of depression that comes from watching a sad moment in a fantasy series or in the grim darkness of the far future. It's the kind of depression you see in the real world, at the bottom of a bottle, day to day, watching someone lose themselves in an addiction, or attempting to bury the pain of their lives. It's, in a word, genuine. Upon viewing the season 2 finale, Adult Swim executives, including producer Mike Lazo, urged the show staff to take the series in a darker direction, and that's exactly what happened. Season 3 continues the writing improvements of season 2, but this time with a non-linear episode order, built around the events leading up to the season 2 finale, before ultimately revealing the aftermath of what occurred to the characters. On top of that, the episodes grew to explore more characters, focusing on other citizens of the town beyond the scandals that Orel would get himself into. Ironically, in an unfortunate turn for the series, despite the Adult Swim executives wanting the show to go in a darker direction, this was ultimately what sealed its own fate on the network. Before just going over the reason why, I really want to stress a heavy content warning for this one. This really may be one of the most serious things Adult Swim has ever aired, and while I would believe it handles the subject matter very maturely for the series, it's still material that many would find unsettling, and as such I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. The episode in context relates to victims of sexual assault traumas, and if that's something you're not comfortable with, then I'd advise you to turn back now. In season 3, the episode Alone aired, which is widely regarded as the darkest episode in the series, and quite possibly one of the darkest television episodes to air on Adult Swim. The episode steps away from Orel's family completely, and instead focuses on the lives of 3 victims of sexual assault as they live alone in an apartment complex. It's a grim character study, examining the different coping mechanisms that these characters have, and turns bits that used to be used as gags earlier in the series into something heavy, and it really doesn't play it for laughs. It completely puts things in a different perspective as the masks that the characters were forced to wear in public are stripped away, and we see these people for what they are when no one else is around. No one else that they have to put up a fake image for. Upon reading the script for this episode, Mike Lazo, the same producer who supported the show and wanted the series to go in a darker direction, canceled the series, slashing the 3rd season from a planned 20 episodes to only 13. The reason for the series cancellation? Mike Lazo and the other executives found the scripts too depressing. Scott Adsit felt as though the executives saw the Adult Swim audience as insomniac potheads, and that the more seriously developing tone of Moral Orel didn't fit in with any of it. So, despite Adult Swim wanting the show to take a darker turn, it apparently was that dark turn that led the very same Adult Swim executives to cancel it. Plans for the rest of the season, as well as seasons 4 and 5, were ultimately scrapped. In the plans for the rest of the season, town librarian Miss Sensordoll would have manipulated the mayor into gaining more control over the town, and Orel's paternal grandfather, an atheist with a heavily strained relationship with Clay, would have moved into the Puppington home. Orel's grandfather would have been a source of emotional growth for Orel, allowing him to move beyond some of his childhood naivety, and Orel's parents would have continued to have a heavy strain on their relationship as both of them begin to have more consistent ongoing affairs. Finishing season 3 and going into season 4, the intention was to inevitably rename the show from Moral Orel to Moralton, to show more events of the town rather than just solely focusing on Orel's life alone. Now, regarding the present day, at the time of this video, I wouldn't say a reboot is likely. Dino Stamatopoulus has shot down plans to continue the series suggested by Dan Harmon, suggesting that the concepts for continuing the show seemed a bit too much like a potential self-insert for himself and didn't feel it was best for the series to go down that route. However, in 2012, a brief prequel special aired on Adult Swim, detailing some of Orel's experiences with his grandfather, learning some early life lessons.
You put everything your grandfather ever said out of your head. Remember that, and you won't go to hell.
Aw.
Hell is bad.
Oh.
Stamatopoulus, Adsit, and Johnston continued to work together, next working on the Adult Swim stop-motion series Frankenhole, High School USA, and again with Bob Odenkirk on David Cross on their Netflix show with Bob and David. Now, if I may, I'd like to take a moment to express my own thoughts about the series cancellation. Ultimately, I think it was a very shallow reason to cancel the show, if it was the case that they thought it didn't fit with viewers who were only going to be insomniacs or high. Now, don't get me wrong, I love these shows on Adult Swim like Aqua Teen Hunger Force and Xavier Renegade Angel. I think they're stupid and very fun series with extremely clever writing. It's possible to be ridiculous and have non-sequitur humor and still be valid as a series, but the genre of adult animation doesn't need to be limited to just that. Just like you could still have silly kids cartoons and serious drama-filled ones, I think the same could be said for adult animation, and Adult Swim should certainly branch out more often. It certainly has with series like Primal and the Samurai Jack continuation, but I think sometimes it would do best to remember, animation is a medium, not a genre. However, even though Moral Orel didn't get to live out its runtime quite as intended, I still think it still accomplished a lot in its time frame. It's a great comedy with some real heartfelt messages in it, and has some real intensive drama and storytelling. But one of the most important things about the series, I'd say, is to understand exactly what the show is making fun of. Now, Look, I don't want to get involved on opinions on religious beliefs, as ultimately, so long as it's not harming anyone, I say what you believe is up to you, and does not deserve to be ridiculed. And Moral Orel isn't a show that mocks people for having belief in a higher power either. Instead, the show is intended to point to the issue of hypocritical individuals who use their beliefs as an excuse to push some sort of social standard onto others, rather than following the beliefs they claim to have. Orel is never mocked for his own beliefs, he's only shown to be a bit naive. And because he's the only one who isn't hypocritical, things actually end up going rather well for him in the long run. But it's the town who's full of people who claim to be intensely religious, yet ban the Bible from schools because it has scenes of nudity in it. It's about a father who forces his son to follow made-up commandments while not even caring for him because he resents his family. What the show makes fun of is hypocrisy, not someone holding on to their beliefs. And this isn't my own interpretation, this comes directly from the showrunners. With all that said, if you have the chance, I would highly recommend checking out the series. If you're a fan of adult animation, can stomach some raunchy humor, but are also in the mood for something that could be a bit more serious, I think Moral Orel will cover those bases for you. It may have been cut short, but it's still a complete series, and while fans of it may find themselves wishing there could be more, it still accomplishes a lot with what it has. If you want to support the show, it can currently be streamed on HBO Max, but considering all the things going on over there, you may need to take to the high seas. If that is the case, you may be able to find the series here on YouTube, but don't tell them I sent you. In fact, on a bit of a humorous note, the nature of Moral Orel on YouTube has caused some of its videos to be automatically flagged as kids content for YouTube Kids. Just another example of YouTube at its finest.
Wow! Everyone sure hates Jesus! Whoops.
If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. Have you seen Moral Orel already? Do you hate your stinking dead-end job? Let me know in the comments below. As always, if you liked the video, please consider supporting the channel with a like or subscribing. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, feel free to join our Discord, linked in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I can see you next time.